Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 188, IO 538c to 539b. Socrates has just quoted a few lines from Homer about something medical in order to ask Io whether a rhapsode or a physician would be better qualified to judge whether Homer says what he says well. Io has been led to interpret kalos finely as well and not as beautifully, and therefore decides that the medical techne of the physician is better suited to judge whether Homer says what he says well. We should note that Socrates is asking which techne would be better suited to judge whether Homer is speaking well, not the proponent of the techne, the expert at the techne, just the techne itself. Socrates is about to quote Homer a few more times, and we're going to have the same problem that we had with the last quote, which is that it isn't clear whether, for the purposes of the dialogue, Socrates is quoting accurately or whether Io simply ignores Socrates' misquoting, or whether Plato himself regards the quote as accurate, because we actually have different versions. In the medical quote, the second half of the second line, and there were only two lines, the second half of the second line is a transposition from earlier in the Iliad. The quote we are about to hear is 3 lines long. There are no transpositions, but some of the words are variant readings. We have various types of lines. They all mean roughly the same thing, and we can expect variations like this in an oral tradition. The only problem for me is it's not clear whether Socrates is supposed to be misquoting or is supposed to be quoting accurately, or whether Io thinks that Socrates is quoting accurately or misquoting. But one thing we should not ignore is that Socrates is able to quote at all on these quite obscure lines from Iliad. This is nothing to do with heroic battles or adventures in the Odyssey. These are abstruse technical lines which probably most people would hear and enjoy but not remember. Socrates is about to quote a simile likening the goddess Iris to a fisherman's hook. Tide hotan lege Homeros, hedem lupdaine hikele espusonikanen, hete katagrau loiobos kerasem memawia, erchetai homes thesi metichsusi pema ferusa. Tauta poteron fomen haliutikesenai technes malon krinai, rhapsodikes, hatta legge kai ete kalos ete me. Deilon deo Socrates hoti haliutikes. What then? Whenever Homer says, and she, like a lead weight, reached the depth, and the weight attached to a horn of a field-dwelling ox, hastening comes, bringing misery to the meat-eating fish. Are we to say that it is the task of the fisherman techne or the rhapsodic techne to discern these things, these words, which he says, and whether he says them finely or not? It's clear, Socrates, that it's the task of the fisherman's techne. Basically, a fish hook made of lead with a bit of horn attached to it will plummet very quickly into the depths. Would the fisherman's techne entire be required to know such a thing? And would a rhapsode or a poet not understand how this works? Would the fisherman's techne say that Homer speaks well because he describes the way a heavy object plunges into the depths? Or would a rhapsode say that Homer speaks beautifully? He uses very good vocabulary and rhythm to put life and beauty into a very dull subject. It's really because of the fallacy that only one techne has exclusive use of the subject matter that we have to make a choice between the fishing techne and the rhapsodic techne. Really, both practitioners, the fisherman and the rhapsode, would understand what Homer has been saying. Probably, actually, the rhapsode is more likely to understand than the fisherman because Homer isn't using everyday language to describe the weighted hook being cast into the water. Socrates has now given two examples of techne other than the rhapsodic techne, which seem to have exclusive control over the subject matter of parts of Homer. He's about to give yet another example, but he turns the tables and in a way makes Io active for once. He suggests that Io is the one who is asking the questions. Skepsai de su eromenu, eroiome. Examine then, in the role of you asking, if you were to ask me, Epede toinun, O Socrates, touton ton technon en Homero heurisces ha proseke hecaste diacrinen, ithimoi exure caeta tu manteoste cae mantices, poia est in ha proseke auto hoio tenai diagignoscen, ete iu etikakos pepoietai. Since then, Socrates, you are finding in Homer the things which are fitting to each of these techni to judge, come now, find also the things of the prophet and of the prophetic techne. What sort of things are fitting to this person to be able to judge whether they have been composed well or badly? Interestingly, Socrates doesn't make Io ask whether Homer is to be judged as speaking kalos, finely, but whether the things, the subject matter, has been composed well or badly. So this is not to do with the beauty of the performance, but with the accuracy of the subject matter. While Socrates had given as examples the physician and the fisherman, he has his hypothetical Io, the one who asks questions, to ask about the prophet, again pushing the rhapsode towards the divine. Socrates carries on after he has Io ask this question. Skepsai hos radios te kai alethe egosoi apokrinumai. Observe how easily and with true things I will answer you. Polachumen gar kai en Odyssea lege, hoion kai ha ho ton melampodidon lege mantis frostus menesteras, For in many places, even in the Odyssey, he says, that means Homer says, such as also the things which Theoclymenos, the prophet of the sons of Melampus, says to the suitors. Odysseus has been away from Ithaca for years, and many nobles of the area have decided to pay court to Penelope in the hopes of becoming king themselves by marrying her. Penelope has been putting them off all these years. The final part of the Odyssey describes Odysseus's return and the way he wins back his kingdom, among other things, by slaughtering all of the suitors. Socrates quotes from a little bit earlier when the seer, the mantis, Theoclymenos, predicts the disaster which is going to come to the suitors. The prophecy is in Odyssey, Book 20, lines 351 to 357. There are some differences between the received text of Homer and the received text of Plato, and as usual we would have the same problems determining who is considered to be accurate or inaccurate in the dialogue. In general, however, it would be impressive that Socrates is able to quote quite well 6 out of 7 lines of the prophecy. Daimonioi tikakonto de paschete nuktimen humon luatai kefalaite proso patenerthete guia oimo gede de deie de dakruntai de pareiai edo lon tepleon prothiron pleie de kai aule hi emenon ereboste huposophon elioste uranu ex apollole kake depidedrom en achlus. O strange ones, what's this bad thing that's happened to you? Your heads and faces and limbs below have been enshrouded by night. Wailing has caught on like fire, and cheeks have been wetted with tears. The front door is full of phantoms, and the hall also is full of those speeding towards Erebus under darkness. The sun of the heaven has been completely destroyed, and a bad mist has overrun. So Theoclymenos is predicting the fate which will befall the suitors. Actually, Odysseus and his son are going to kill them all, but this prophecy tells us what will happen to the souls of the suitors. They will go down to the underworld. I'm sure Io is going to tell us that a prophet will be able to judge whether Homer is saying this well, better than a rhapsode would be able to judge